So today I'm going to talk about Enneagram Type 4 and in particular about a time when I behaved like an Enneagram Type 4, when I felt like an Enneagram Type 4. We all feel, behave like all types at different points in our life. So I'm not saying I am or aren't a Type 4, but this is a time when I felt like a Type 4. So basically what happened was I went to work in China. And I teach English in a high school there, and I was previously teaching English in a high school in Thailand. And so I left that job for this job in China. And it was a ton of effort to do that. I had to fly back to Australia. Before I flew back to Australia, they had just changed the system. So there was this thing called apostle certificates. So it's like a process where you have your certificates, like degrees and whatnot, verified to get visas to work in other countries. And China had adopted this system months beforehand. And so it was a new system and no one knew about it. And the school that I was supposed to work in didn't understand it. And I had to research it all myself. And I had to look into that myself and go and see if I could process it in the embassy in Bangkok, the Chinese embassy there, because I was living in Thailand, teaching at a high school there, and I couldn't. And so then I had to go back to Australia just to do that. And so that was plane tickets. But I had planned to do a comedy set, my first ever comedy set actually, in Thailand. And so, I had to fly back to Thailand just for this comedy set because I had planned, I'd been working on that for months. And so it wasn't like, it was such a big deal because I hadn't done that before. And so, I had to fly back to Australia because my visa suddenly became ready, whereas I wanted to stay in Thailand longer because it was cheaper to live there. Well, I waited for my visas to process, but I couldn't do that because the people in China were annoying me about sending them these visas, and I had to get these visas processed. I had to do all sorts of things. I had to get this apostle system where I had to, I might be pronouncing that wrong, maybe it's apostille or something like that, but it's a system whereby you receive this verification that your certificates are real. And so I had to send some of them to Canada because they can only be verified under this apostille system by the country that they come from, and one of these certificates came from Canada. And so then, you have to process all these things like police checks, and because of the company I used to process that, it wasn't accepted by the people that were apostiling it in Australia or something. So I had to go to a lawyer and have that verified under a different process. And there was all this stuff, and it was taking tons of time and energy to get this job in China because I was flying in and out in different places, and didn't have anywhere to store my things, so I had to carry all this extra luggage. It was the stuff I bring, it was everything basically that I had to bring to Thailand, then I had to move it back to Australia, then I had to move it to China, and I had to store it, pay for it to be stored. Well, did I pay for it to be stored? At certain points I have, but anyway, the point is that I had to do a lot of stuff and to get this job in China. And then when I got to the job in China, they didn't even pick me up in a car. I had to catch a taxi, and they totally ripped me off. The taxi, I think it was like 3.5 hours to get to the school from the airport. They totally ripped me off, and I turn up there like early hours in the morning, and I'm just waiting because no one picked me up or anything. I'm just waiting for hours and hours. Pitch darkness in China in front of this school, and oh man. And anyway, then it turns out that the school wants me to work 14 days straight in a row. And there was nothing in my contract about that. And so I'm like, what are you talking about? No one expects to work 14 days straight as a high school teacher. And I had previously worked in China in a high school, and they didn't require that. It was strictly a Monday to Friday thing. And they were like, well, the contract specifies how many lessons you do a month, and so we can require them whenever we want. And they wanted 14 days straight, and I'm like, I can do 6 days, that's the best I can do. And so they said no and decided to fire me because I wouldn't work 14 days straight. And but it got more sort of like involved with that. There was so much lying. I mean, the beginning lie was that, not even mentioning the 14 days stuff, which I guess that's sort of a lie by omission. Or maybe it's something else, but it was definitely definitely important information they left out. And then they said I had to leave. I could stay teaching there for another month after they decided to fire me. And then they got another teacher to replace me, and so they told me they wanted me to go. I assume that's why they told me they wanted me to go. It's not like they were telling me any of these things up front, but it definitely seemed like it could be that. And so then the other teacher couldn't get a visa, and then all of a sudden they weren't allowing me to go. Even though they already told me I could go. And so the way the visa system worked over there, they have to release you from your visa. And so I couldn't get another job in China until they released me, and they wouldn't release me because they couldn't, their replacement teacher for me had gone. So now they were making me stay there. And so all of this stuff was being happened. So like they're basically holding me hostage, and it was all done with, they'd tell me one thing and then they'd change it the next day, and I'd be like, you said this, and then they wouldn't even mention that. They'd just blatantly lied, and they wouldn't admit to having said the other thing, and all of these horrible things were happening. And I was just being treated like crap. And, they're doing this to me, and the woman that was doing it, or who was managing the foreign staff there, basically had no idea who I was. She wasn't one of the people I worked with on the day-to-day basis. I only worked there for, a month before I was fired. And it was, I don't know, maybe around 6 weeks in total, including the time after I was fired, that they forced me to stay there. Even though I had another job, and I had said I was going to go to the other job, but I couldn't go to the other job, and all of this stuff. Anyway, so this woman didn't even know me, and I was obviously really pissed off with her because she had made so many lies. And even when I said it wasn't 14 days, even when I said I wasn't going to work 14 days, and she said, basically she fired me then because I wasn't going to do that. Then she said, well, if you can make up those days, that time that you didn't come in, which was only like 4 lessons for that day, I only took that one day off. People would have taken more days off just out of sickness than me just wanting 1 day off a week, because normally you had the weekend off. And so the only reason why they were being like this, in the end, I would have been much more likely to turn up than anyone working there, any of the foreign teachers, I mean. Just because, everyone else would have just said out of sickness, but I was being honest and just, refusing to do 14 days straight. And so, refusing to do 7, any more than 6 days a week. Anyway, so she said, oh, okay, we're firing you. But then she went back on that and was like, well, if you make up these lessons that you didn't turn up for, which was like 4 lessons, so less than 4 hours work, we won't fire you because we only have like 2 of these 14 days a year, and this was the last one. So, or more than 7 days having to work in a year. We only have 2 of them in a year. But then the next week, I think it was the next week, it might have been the week after, but I think it was the very next week after she said that, they required it again. And I was like, hey, I'm not doing it. I already told you I'm not doing it. And then that was like when they're like, well, we're definitely firing you. And I was like, well, you told me that you didn't have any more of these coming up. To which they didn't respond. They don't, just the unbelievable entitlement that these people have is insane. It's otherworldly stuff. And you can see why all these stories come out of China of people harassing staff, being treated really badly, because there is, if you're the boss over there, there's this, was a massive train noise anyway. If you're the boss over there, there's this sense of the sense of entitlement and ownership of the employee is so enormous. Anyway, so I remember thinking to myself, and this is the type 4 part. Sorry, it took so long to get to that. But I felt like I needed to give you the background to put you in that emotional state that I was in to see where I'm at, you know. So I've lost thousands of dollars just turning up to China because I've been getting airfares between Thailand, China and Australia, bouncing around, processing all these documents which cost money, doing all these things, moving around my luggage which cost extra money, was more than just paying for plane tickets to fly myself, and all of these things. And so, you know, I stood to lose a lot of money, having been fired after a month. And so this is the place I was in. And I also lost a good job that I had in Thailand. And so to take this job. Anyway, so I was in this emotional state, in this, not just emotional state, this actual physical state, this particular circumstance. I was in this situation, and I remember feeling, this is the type 4 part, I remember feeling like I wanted to have a go at this manager, to give her shit, to use common man parlance, common man speech. I wanted to give her shit, to have a go at her, so she would hate me, just so that she wouldn't be indifferent towards me, basically. Yeah, because that's what she was basically, treating me like garbage, making me lose all this money, totally uprooting my life, and then just throwing me away after all these lies that didn't, you know, that she just did off the cusp. And so the sort of treatment of that, where you're sort of, it's just sort of like, you know, the way she saw me, because I hadn't arced up, you know, got pissed off or anything in any way. In order to, you know, I felt like, yeah, I want to have a go at her, just so she knows that I hate her. And that was the feeling of being a type 4, that feeling. Because it's about, let me just check my notes here. Yeah, I didn't want to be overlooked. That's a good word for it. And I didn't want her to dismiss me as though I was just insignificant. That's what was just happening. It was like she had, you know, very little sense of me as a person at all, and had just done all this stuff to me. And so I didn't want her to just dismiss me and that would be it. And, you know, I didn't want to feel just overlooked by this person. I would rather she hate me. And so I wanted to have a go at her. I wanted to have a go at her mostly because I believed it was the right thing to do. But I also had this type 4 part of me that wanted to have a go at her so that I didn't feel like I was dismissed, you know, I was overlooked. And that's a very type 4 feeling. And even the idea of believing that it's the right thing to do is type 4 as well. I actually do believe it was the right thing to do. But, you know, the type 4 is connected to the type 1. And this is one of the ways that the type 4 is connected to the 1. Yeah, indignation, just looking at my notes here. So that's the feeling, indignation, anger or annoyance provoked by what is perceived as unfair treatment. That's the definition of indignation straight from Google. So that feeling is a very type 1 feeling, and the 4 is connected by the internal lines of connection to the type 1. And so that was a part of it too. That was the 4, that was a feeling of the 4 moving to the 1. Me believing it was the right thing to do. And the feeling of, you know, not wanting that woman to hate me, just so that she wouldn't feel, so that she wouldn't be just dismissing me and feel nothing of me and not even notice me. Yeah, just be overlooking me. Yeah, I would rather her hate me than overlook me or dismiss me or see me as insignificant or not even notice me. Be disregarded. And so, the last chance I got to see her, I gave her 2 barrels. Bang. And that was the right thing to do, actually, but it was also, I could feel that type 4 part of it. And I think too, particularly here, all the lead up, which I'm sorry took so long, but should help, that's got me into that type 4 feeling, that situation that I described to you. But the type 4 will go into that feeling with much less provocation, which much less significant stimulus that would suggest that one should feel that way. So, basically a type 4 is feeling like that at the drop of a hat. They often feel that they've suffered so much, been through so much. And, it's a glorification of their own emotions. And it's often based on this assumption that because they feel these emotions themselves, they know that they have these emotions and that they've felt this way. But they don't know everyone else has felt this way. And so there's this assumption that they have felt this way particularly and that others haven't, which is wrong. This is totally wrong. This is one of the flaws, the core flaws of the Enneagram Type 4, this belief that they have felt this intensity of emotions and others haven't. Which much more defines a Type 4 in this idea that they feel things more intensely. No, it's the belief that they feel things more intensely that much more defines them. Which is based on this idea that they know that they have felt those things, which actually is another connection to Enneagram Type 1. Because Enneagram Type 1 is highly based on this concept of I know, which is a form of, being indignant is part of I know. Self-righteousness is based on I know. These are very one-ish places. The I know feeling. And it does relate to the 4 in that sense that the 4, but the core feeling of the Type 4 is the assumption that they, or maybe I shouldn't use core, one of the characteristic feelings of the Type 4, because the core of the Type 4, of course, is shame or shamelessness, but the characteristic, one of the main characteristics of Type 4 is the feeling that they know, is the feeling that they have had all these, and the assumption that they have all this intensity of emotions and that others don't. I think that's about it. Anyway, it's the beginning of May 2025. Thank you.